Hello, everybody. Very nice seeing you today. Today we're starting a new model, which is called Global Technology Trends in Life Sciences sector. Hopefully, you know what life sciences is, but I will be talking today about the sector, how it works, how it's been structured, and what are the global trends in the sector. So let's start. So firstly, I hope that from our previous modules, you learned the framework. Have you seen this framework before? Anybody? Nobody? Okay, first time. Fine. So this is the framework of value creation, and in this module, we'll be focused on the first element, which is science and technology. And science is really important as a kind of predecessor for any value creation. So initially you have fundamental science and you work with that and try to create value, create companies, which would be multi-billion companies curing diseases. So that's where it starts with the science and technology. And why it is important to be in the trendiest technology. Hello? Okay. So why it's important to be in the trendiest technologies? Sometimes we feel that some technologies are overhyped, and we think that there's some kind of hidden gem where you can create more value by knowledgeably choosing that. But in the end, if you want to create a successful company, you have to be focused on the latest technology trends. Firstly, if we talk about the technology trends which we're seeing today, they have the Q promise. Hopefully we can find some curative medicines which are based on transformational modalities, which are transformational not just for this particular disease, but also for the whole healthcare system. Also, what is important is that these trends, and we will see this today, they are all based on the presumption that they show engineering approach to creating drugs and therapies. Which means that if at some point you have to apply a similar technology or the same technology to other diseases, then you can actually apply that, you can adjust, you can tweak it, and you can create new vaccines or new therapies for different types of cancers, and that is called bioengineering approach. Also, if you don't have the necessary protection of the intellectual property, unfortunately, the value of any of such innovation will be zero, and this would not be called innovation. So, when you go into something which is technologically new, it means that there's potentially a wild west in the intellectual property, and you can potentially block a full modality for yourselves and create a lot of value, like actually discovering and capturing value from a totally new modality. However, I would say that there are a lot of things you can do in the sector without choosing the latest modality, the latest technology. But if you are choosing the route towards the early exit, towards the VC venture capital rounds, then you have to be in the trend, and you have to create companies which would actually be ethical, so they will be in full compliance with all the globally accepted procedures. They will be using the newest business models, and we'll be talking about the newest business models today as well. And they would be using the state-of-the-art technology stack. And if you're doing that, then you would be loved by venture capitalists and by big pharma players, and it would be much easier for you to float on the public stock exchanges and essentially then sell the company at very early stages, or license some of your products at some of your programs, not products even, some of your preclinical programs at very early stages. So that's why the trends are very important, and just to make sure you understand that, in case, even unfortunately, even in case some drug is delivering substantial value and showing great results, great data, like really helping with the disease, but if it's not trendy, unfortunately, it may be ignored by big pharma players and definitely would be ignored by venture capitalists. And so because everybody is trying to find a new way which could be fully protected from the intellectual property standpoint and which would have the Q promise. So hopefully you understand that. So that's the reason why we are having this module, so that you are in the context of the global technology trends and understand what is actually valuable and what is probably less exciting for the global community. And here you have the slide which shows the patent cliff in 2023, next year. So you're seeing that there will be over 50 billion of value of revenues, 50 billion of revenues potentially lost due to generic competition, because these drugs which are in this large bar in 2023, in this bar you have such drug like Humira. Humira is a drug that sells up to 20 billion a year, and in 23 next year they will lose their patents, their patents will expire. So we will see that the companies will be looking to replace these drugs with something new, which would be fully protected, where they can charge real value and really drive the innovation forward. So overall, you see that in the next 5 years, you have over 200 billion of sales at risk, and there will be a lot of M&As, a lot of acquisition of the latest technologies. And if you want to play in that stories, so you have to understand the global trends. This on the one side, so it's from the point of view of sales of the companies. But then, of course, the other route towards the liquidity is the IPO, initial public offerings. And you see here the latest trends in 2021. They may not continue in the future, but at least if you look at in 2020 and 2021, you would see that there were a lot of companies which, like in the left top chart, a lot of companies which raised publicly in the markets like over 100 million, and the number of such companies grows. But what is important here, that at the development stage on the right side, on the right-hand side, on top of the slide, this chart shows that there were a lot of companies which went public at preclinical stage. A lot of companies, and you see that the number of preclinical companies going public, you see this, you see, right, hopefully, this preclinical stage. The number of preclinical companies which don't have any data in humans, these companies are going public successfully, raising funds for their programs. Of course, anyway, the phase 1 companies, of course, are many more companies going public. Anyway, it is very unusual that so many preclinical companies are going public these days. And of course, in terms of therapeutic areas, cancer, you will hear a lot today that the cancer always is dominating the market, and you see this from the chart. And then what you see here also, small molecules, which is the most straightforward technologies normally, There's still the largest number of companies going public who are developing small molecules, but and straightforward biologics. But anyway, you see that the number of cell and gene therapies, which we'll be talking about today, is also growing. Well, in 2018 there was major rise in the sector. Because in 2017 there were a few gene therapies approved in the U.S. So it gave a good time for the other gene therapies companies going public in 2018. But anyway, you see that this kind of, before that, if you look like in the years before that, there were no gene therapy companies going public. They were just really few. So now this is growing, and if you are following these trends, then you actually can like go public early. You can license your program at very early stage, even at preclinical stage, and then of course you can sell the company as early as once you have some data in humans. And I would say that in case you're doing really dated technologies, firstly, you would not be able to raise venture capitalist funding. And secondly, you will, all the big pharma players, they will wait until you get into the market. And only then they would look at you and potentially acquire the company. But most of the time, your exit strategy would be like a dividend strategy, so that you would try to pay back your investments through dividend flow. Okay, so this model would answer the following questions for you. So firstly, where the healthcare in general, this whole industry is going, and then of course you would probably understand some I would say some thoughts behind that, some overall ideas behind what's happening to the healthcare system, and specifically to life sciences. And then we will check why investors are particularly interested in this or that technologies, and what questions they ask, what are their primary considerations specifically for each technology. Also, we'll be at our practical meetings. We'll be talking about and looking at specific companies, how they present their science, and hopefully you will understand how is the best way to present science in your presentation, how to make it balanced, so that it's enough for investors, but you're not disclosing too much, and you're not overwhelming anybody with your scientific information. And finally, in case you are from our Innovation Entrepreneurship Program, hopefully you are, Innovation Entrepreneurship Program, anybody? Oh, not you? No? Okay. So in spring, you'll be able to choose the technology module, and this will be three modules. And for you to choose, once you go through all of these technologies, you will understand that you actually need to learn molecular biology because you're so fascinated about molecular biology. You do not understand anything about that, about what I'll be talking today, primarily. Secondly, we'll be thinking about robotics, about new materials and biophysics, and about space tech, because we'll be touching this as well, and potentially, you'll be thinking of data science. So we will cover all of these enabling technologies in this module, so that you understand that you can pick and choose whatever you wish and learn it from the very beginning. Even if you're completely new to molecular biology, you will understand why you're learning that, why, and you will feel that you probably don't know anything about this and you wish to know more. Okay, so this is the overall approach, how we look into the potential potential interventions into the human health. So you should understand that currently we don't look just at the human as a separate entity. So we're looking at humans. We're looking at the internally in the organism all the elements of the biological system, and this we'll be covering today. We also look at humans at the behaviors of the humans, and hope some of the therapies which we're covering at our later one of our last lecture. Some of the behaviors actually, if you change them, you can cure some of the diseases which do not have any pharma cure, like any pill you can swallow to cure the disease. But with changing your behavior, you can actually do that. And for that, you have special applications. And finally, through these behaviors, there are many more applications which we're using today already to combat the pandemic, which we have nowadays. And this is all about social behavioral system and how we preventing the spread of the disease, etc. And finally, of course, the environmental system also drives some of the diseases, and we have to keep this in mind and make sure that the kind of ESG topics, like ESG. Hopefully, everybody knows ESG here. Everybody knows, no? Just one. ESG topics. Okay, so ESG topics is the new kind of agenda for the global society about ecology, society, and corporate governance, and general governance. And this ESG presents a new agenda for the societal system. So this is the holistic determinants of human health. Today we'll be primarily focused on biological system and even on genotype. And this we'll cover later. So, but we have to have in mind that health is not just about your tests and just about humans. And then how do we choose what we'll be covering in this module? How do we choose these global technology trends? So firstly, I showed you in the previous slide that this has to be a systematic overview of all the potential approaches to intervene into the health of a human being. The other way to choose the right technology trends was to make a survey. And this is a very funny survey. This is a survey done in the University of California, San Francisco, where some of the great scientists were asked what they think would be the major trends which have impact. You see here, on the upper side is game-changing impact. On the downside is overhyped technology. And on the right side is the likelihood that it will definitely happen at some point, and we have to predict when. But on the left side, that this is just fiction. And this is really funny here. I don't think that you may not see that. I will actually give to everybody the presentation, so you will have the presentation, so that's not a problem. But here, what is the funny things? Okay, so let's start with some of the ideas. Firstly, the idea of that the rich will stay forever young with anti-aging therapies. It's a fiction here. It will never happen, probably, at least based on this survey. And this will not be game-changing, right? So it's just for the rich, so it's probably not for many, just for few. And the same, actually, the funny thing is that this point, which is kind of a funny point, is almost at the same level as the instant disease diagnosis with smartwatch. So at least these scientists do not believe that the smartwatch can actually monitor your health and actually make diagnosis. The other funny thing which I liked was that humans and AI merge. So we'll merge with artificial intelligence, and this looks like fiction, right? And that's the way the scientists also judged. But here, just very close to this point, you see cure for common cold. Common cold, you know what common cold is, right? So, that's almost the same fiction as the merge of AI and human beings. So we probably will not have a cure for common cold, unfortunately. That's bad news. The other interesting thing is here, gene editing. So you see that gene editing, which is really like transformational technology, and we'll be covering today, actually the whole lecture today is primarily focused on gene editing. They claim this is still a fiction, and however, this of course is potentially a game changer. Nevertheless, if you look here, cell and gene therapies would become affordable. That's another point here, and it says that this will happen. So cell and gene therapies are kind of potentially, so this kind of contradicts at least this point of gene editing and gene therapies, and potentially, so they will probably become affordable. Interesting point, another one is this cure for cancer. It shows here, so most of the scientists are actually pessimistic that this potentially may not happen, at least at some point soon. And this is because, of course, the cancer is, that this is not just one disease. There's a lot of diseases. It's like hundreds of diseases, cold overall, oncology, and cancer. And this is actually close to like creating bionic eyes, which will banish blindness. And what is actually more predictable and game-changing is a change in the health coverage in the US. And this is really very important. That the US is probably like an exception among the rich countries. US doesn't have universal health coverage as compared to the European Union and all of the OECD countries. So all the developed countries, primarily, like most of them, or at least almost all of them, have universal health coverage, and US here stands an exception. And so the other thing is that the other very important thing here is that the next global pandemic will wipe out millions of people, and then the other is that there will be superbugs. Superbugs. Superbugs means bacteria which you cannot cure with the existing drugs. So you see here that this is actually something which everybody expects that this will happen, and for that we don't have too many drugs, and like currently, hopefully, with the latest platforms, with RNA platforms, we can actually cope with that in next time. So, and just final points, microbiome. We'll be covering microbiome in my second lecture next time. So it says that this is potentially overhyped technology, but this will actually happen. Anyway, so this is the the way you can look and check what could be the global technology trends. And finally, the best way to choose global technology trends, in my view, as a venture capitalist, and I have bias anyway, as a venture capitalist, so I'm looking into which technologies are actually being invested into from the best venture groups in the world. And here, this is a great list. It shows exactly what we'll be covering at this module, but this is not why it's a great list, but the list shows that there are a lot of companies backed by a lot of venture groups, and all of those groups, if you are in the life sciences industry, you would normally have to know them and recognize them by names, because these are very specialized healthcare investment groups, and they are investing heavily. On the first place is drug discovery companies, drug discovery platforms, computational biology. We'll be covering this probably in 2 lectures from now. Then CAR T cells. CAR T we'll be covering today. So we'll be covering the cell therapies combined with ex-vivo gene editing. Gene editing is on the third place. And then comes a few others. So but today we'll be primarily focused on these 2 of those, on the gene editing and ex-vivo gene editing, and CAR T cells. Okay, so so in my view, this is the best way to evaluate what is the most the most trendy thing which investors are actually putting money into. So really, money speaks. This is the structure of the module. So again, so today we're covering the overall what is life sciences sector and how we structure it. Then we'll be discussing the code of life. This is the name of the lecture of today. We'll be covering the ex-vivo gene editing, and we'll start a bit about in-vivo gene editing as well. And later on in the next lectures, we'll be discussing living therapies, some like targeted therapies. We'll be discussing biophysics, radiotherapy, nano delivery platforms, AI in healthcare, also like quantum computing here, drug discovery, some diagnostics, and then we'll be discussing omics and cyborgs, how people become cyborgs, and finally 4P medicine, so all the telemedicine, all this stuff like on the behavioral changes, etc., on the societal things, and electronic healthcare records, etc., will be covered in the last lecture. Okay, so this is the model structure. Today we're going through code of life. Okay. A few words about myself. Hopefully everybody knows my profile. Everybody knows my profile? Nobody? One person? Okay. So yeah, so I'm a venture capitalist. I'm investing in biotech. I actually invested in 3 companies last year, which is a DNA storage company here. Okay. And then the next generation CAR T company. So next generation CAR T company, that was our first time we invested into so-called advanced therapy and advanced therapy space. So advanced therapies are all of these therapies which we're primarily covering, like gene editing, like RNA vaccines or RNA therapies, etc. So this is called generally advanced therapies. Okay. But first, let's cover the healthcare, the life sciences. What is healthcare? So healthcare system includes a lot of segments, and generally speaking, like most of it is covered by the state, by the government. However, like in the US, it's like 50-50%, the government, and half of it covered by the private funding. Okay. And what is important here is that the percentage of GDP for healthcare is rising globally, because the value of life is increasing, and people like really are prioritizing the funding from the state towards the healthcare system. So in the US, we see like overall rise of the expenses. So currently in 2020, the overall expense for the healthcare actually was higher than $4 trillion. $4 trillion, which is kind of a crazy number anyway, but you have to like understand the like overall magnitude of the numbers. So $4 trillion for healthcare, which amounts like or up to like 17-18% of the GDP of the US, and it is expected to rise to 6 trillion, and will be almost 20% of the GDP. So 20% of the GDP is like going into the healthcare system, and of course this actually drives a lot of pressure and a lot of criticism. But I would tell you that I don't know what's happening. The criticism is that that the drug prices are very very high, and the companies which produce drugs are kind of making money on the lives of people, on their diseases, etc. So because people, of course, they need drugs. We still have diseases. People are dying, and that's why there's a lot of questions about this expenses. But as you see, I would agree to that in terms of if you look at that, in case the percentage of the expenses for healthcare system is low, the percentage of the GDP for healthcare is low, then you normally create a very cheap medicine, and you cannot in the system. We only have 5% for the healthcare, or less, as you see here, like in Indonesia, India, Turkey, China, and other countries. You would not be able to buy very expensive drugs. But then, and of course, there will be there will be shortage of doctors. There will be queues for innovative drugs. There will be quotas to get the drug, and this is, in my view, totally unacceptable. If we believe that the value of human life is invaluable, then there could not be quotas for getting the drug. This is the whole concept is kind of wrong. Anyway, there are other countries, and on the average in the European countries, we see that it's 7 to 9% of GDP is devoted to healthcare. And these are countries which have very efficient healthcare systems, but they are not the leaders in the world of creating drugs, of developing drugs. And those countries which have over, say, 10% of their GDP devoted to healthcare system, they are not as efficient in terms of healthcare systems, but this surplus goes to fund the innovation in the life sciences industries. So the life sciences industry really grows in the countries where the percentage of the GDP being devoted to healthcare is higher than 10%. This is kind of an observation which I made based on this chart. I won't say that this is kind of proven by any specific kind of analysis, but it looks like that. And we'll see this on the next, in a couple of next slides. So, so in terms of the overall, I would say, economic trends. So we'll be focused on the model in this module primarily on technology trends. But in terms of economic trends, we see that due to COVID-19, there was really explosion of telehealth services. For many years, telehealth was kind of a vision, but nobody was using the telemedicine services, at least less than 10%. And now it's almost half of the visits are going online. The other thing is that people are always discussing whether there's whether the overall sector of life sciences is overhyped. In my view, that's it's not happening, because we have so many technological advancements which will create a lot of value in the future. In my view, at least, what we're seeing today is the right valuation for this particular market segment, and actually it fell over 50% over the last 12 months. So in my view, the correction is already there, and there are a lot of technological advancements which will drive the value further. We also see a very interesting trend that, as I told you, some of these medicines are curative, and the question is, how much do you pay for that? In case you pay for curative therapy, as if you're paying for a pill, which was previously was used for the chronic disease, economically it would not be viable for the pharma companies. Because they are primarily focused on chronic diseases, where you can charge people for many years, and they will be like using these therapies like forever until the end. So if you are able to cure the disease and actually transform a chronic disease towards like really health state, just through one procedure, from one gene therapy application, it means that you have to calculate the whole value for, like, say, for 20 years ahead, which this person would be paying for chronic disease drug, and then pay pharma company upfront this whole amount. And this could be a crazy amount. You know that the most expensive drug is over $2 million per procedure. But this is a curative drug. And not many countries can actually pay that. But in the US, as you saw, they are really devoting a lot to healthcare, and they are covering that. Of course, there's new pricing models being developed. One of those is like really a paradigm shift from payment per pill, as it was for chronic diseases, but payment for performance. So in case a person is actually cured, then the drug gets reimbursed. And this, I believe, is really fair, since there's a curative promise. Drug may not work for everybody, but in case it actually worked, you have to pay the value of life. The value of life, which is estimated by the government. And finally, the very important trend is digital transformation, which means AI, using AI for drug discovery, using AI for diagnostics, and then of course the using automation, robotics, and natural language processing, etc. So we shall see that this in the model, that there were a lot of things which are now being transformed digitally, and generally speaking, we saw a lot of transformation in the financial sector, in the telecommunications, and many other industries. But now the digital transformation comes into healthcare, and of course there are a lot of negative factors as well. The major one is, of course, this pricing pressure. The pricing pressure is really is the major threat for the whole industry. In case the prices are cut, you'll get much less investment from venture capitalists straight away. Actually, there will be no delay or lag. There will be no adaptation period. Like straight away, if the prices are lowered, the venture capitalists would not be investing, and this will kill the whole industry in terms of companies going public or selling the companies. So this is the major threat, is potentially pressure on drug pricing. And of course, this patent cliffs, which I mentioned. Once the patents expire, the sales are going very low. And of course, there are a lot of scandals around latest approvals, where that a vaccine to be approved needs at least 10 years, normally 15 years. And these were all approved within less than a year, within 9 months. Of course, there were a lot of controversies on that front, and a lot of societal question marks. So about that. Anyway, so this, I will give you some arguments on the pricing, because this is the major threat to the industry. I don't think that you're fighting this fight, but we, as a venture capitalists and those who are in the industry, we are fighting this fight. And I will just give you a few ideas. Generally speaking, why there was really the whole story of drug prices came into the spotlight was because of Martin Shkreli. Does anybody know Martin Shkreli here? No? Nobody. Martin Shkreli? Nobody? Okay, you have to know the guy, because this is the most hated guy in the world, especially in the drug industry. This person. Actually, what he did was he bought a company. He acquired the rights for a drug, which was used by primarily by HIV positive patients, and raised the price from $13.5 to $750 per pill. So just at once, because he could do that. This was a generic product available in the market for tens of years, and he changed the price like 5,000 times. So increased the price 5,000 times. And well, of course, he was like later on jailed, not because of that, but because of some other allegations. And nobody actually could prosecute this particular act which he did. Everybody hated him, but it was possible within the regulatory framework to raise prices so high. And this was done in 2015. And since then, the politicians became playing and discussing the prescription drug prices all the time. And so far, nobody actually managed to lower the prices. But what is important here is that I mentioned that there's a lot of value and a lot of expenses in the healthcare system in the US, like almost 20% of the GDP. But most of that is going to the services, to the hospital services, physicians, clinical services, everything around that. And the drugs are only 14% of that chart, of that pie. And if you want to actually cut the expenses within the healthcare system, then you could look into these particular areas. And then within the prescription drugs, there are only like 20% used for innovative drugs. 80% is for the generic drugs which are cheap, available. So if you cut the price for oncology drugs, for vaccines, for anything like that, which are really innovative, which are creating a lot of value and exports for the U.S. and for many other countries, for a few other countries, you will actually cut the innovation in the space. So this is really important. This is the number one threat for the life sciences industry. That's why I'm talking about that. And it is great to be in the life sciences industry right now. So because the value of the companies which are public in this space, it tripled over the last less than 20 years. So okay. So and it's expected to grow substantially in the next year. So life sciences is one of the most attractive industry, unless the prices will go down. Anyway, so there are a lot of new products, and just there are sometimes some of the people discuss and believe that all the innovations are somewhat in the past. Nothing actually happens. But at least in life sciences space, everything happens right now. So, you have all of these gene therapies, cell therapies, microbiome, synthetic biology, immunotherapies, everything changed over the last 5 years. We would never have any of these RNA vaccines which we're using today everywhere in the world, or even the vector vaccines, which is a Sputnik V, just 5-7 years ago. At least RNA therapies, and RNA vaccines for sure. Also, of course, there's a lot of advancements in terms of AI, drug discovery, automation, and we'll see a lot of new drugs being developed much quicker and much cheaper. And we'll see the shortening of the period for drug development from 10 years to 5 years to 3 years potentially, as we saw with the vaccines. Yeah, anyway, the United States continues to lead the rest of the world on the investment size, on the number of new entities, new molecular entities being approved, and in many other aspects. However, China actually rose 13 times over the past 6 years. Okay, so this is the overview of the healthcare system. Within healthcare system, you have this like the drugs, which is 14%, at least in the US. Within this 14% of healthcare system, you have like less than 5%, which is actually the innovative drugs which we're discussing. So this is kind of a small sector, and there are only 300,000 people involved in the US in this particular market, but these 300,000 people are creating immense value. Like they are creating like multi-billion companies all the time. So, and we will see this today. And now about the life sciences, how we structure that. The life sciences industry and the term life sciences is being used in a very rich definition and also a bit more like narrowly. And we will be using the more narrow definition of life sciences. But generally speaking, this is one of the best structures I've seen. That was the structure I created by myself, so please remember that. I like it. So there are like verticals, and then there are like, so verticals, like I would say, kind of the industrial verticals, and then of course there are technological, like on like from the on the row side. So the life sciences primarily talks about healthcare, but the problem is that if you look at that, the mental health, the body health, it's not about healthcare, it's about sick care. We are like caring about sick people, we're not caring about healthy people. And this is the kind of the paradigm shift which we are going through today, that we actually should focus on this, on the wellness, on the well-being, on healthcare, and like really keep the healthcare at the like best, the optimum level, and try not really try to avoid people getting sick, like their body or mentally sick, and really help them be like feel well. So this is the this is general trend, and also in terms of verticals in the rich definition, we have food tech and agri-tech also within life sciences space. We have pets, and then we have whatever is using biotechnology, and biotechnology is being used everywhere currently. So that's why it's really good to be in the life sciences space, because there will be more and more biotechnology used in the like DNA storage, for example, or in some other industrial applications. So, however, anyway, we'll be focused in our lectures on this narrow definition, which is body health and mental health, and also normally life sciences in the more narrow definition is cut here. So, like this is the life sciences normally. But at the lectures we'll also be covering this like slightly. So we'll be covering AI drug discovery, some of the digital therapeutics, telemedicine, etc. But our primary focus would be this. Okay, so this is the structure, and I would say that in each of those technological like row in this table, there are like really impressive advancements and great technology trends. And we'll be trying to cover all of those systematically, although this may be a discussion for many more hours than we have here. Okay, so hopefully you remember this slide and use it whenever you have to systematically cover the potential ways how you can tackle disease, how you can diagnose it, or which tools you may have at the lab to discover drugs and develop drugs. Yeah, so I mentioned that the US dominates the industry, not only based on the expenses, but also in the valuations of the companies. So here the valuations is whatever is 2.8 trillion of US dollars. And yeah, so better to look at this here. So it's like almost 40% is United States, and China is kind of coming in the way and growing substantially, went over 5 times over the last 5 years. And then Switzerland, Japan, UK, Germany, Denmark, France. So what the message here is that that life sciences industry is not everywhere. It's not some kind of industry which like any developed country has. There are a lot of developed countries which do not have like drug development industries, biopharma, anything like that. So if you look at the new molecules which were approved globally, you would see that over half of those were approved in the US. And then if we're like saying the US and then like Europe, it's not enough. Europe, like there are many countries in Europe which should not have a biopharma, a really like large and competitive biopharma industry. In my view, to a certain degree, life sciences is as complicated as space tech. So it has to be really supported. It's potentially more complicated than space tech. So you see here France, Germany, Switzerland, and UK from Europe, and Japan in Asia. By the way, China is not here. China is primarily focused on kind of more straightforward drugs and less expensive drugs, where they're similar to some other countries. Anyway, the other thing is, which I'm hearing as a myth, is that there are not too many drugs approved. This is true. By the way, how many do you think that drugs are approved generally, globally, a year? Hello? How many? 2? How many? How many drugs are approved? How many? Like the quantity of drugs, the quantity of new drugs, of new molecules. How do you think? It's like hundreds, thousands, millions? Hundreds. Yeah, so at least if you look into the US, they are approving they have record numbers right now. And these are around 50 drugs a year. So just 50 drugs a year. And potentially another 50 in the world. So it's like 100 drugs a year. So this is, and you understand that in terms of clinical trials, there are hundreds of thousands of clinical trials going on in the world. And just 50 drugs a year, or less than 100, or around 100, are being approved each year. So each drug is really a major success. Something like really happened to the world if you manage to approve a drug. That's on the one side. On the other side, some people claim that there are no drugs being approved, or they are less and less approved. But you see here on this chart, on the left, that the number of drugs being approved are growing. Well, growing probably it's still kind of stable, but it's still, we have some record numbers over the last few years. Also interesting here is that as compared to 2003 and 2020, that more and more biological drugs are being approved as compared to small molecules. Who doesn't know the difference between small molecule and biologics? 1, 2, 3, just one. Anyway, yeah. So this is important to understand. Yeah. So we probably. I will actually cover this later, but this is the important to understand, and you will learn that if you choose the molecular biology course, which will happen later, I think in 2 months from now. So molecular biology. Okay, so this shows that there are more and more biologics being approved. So the molecules, which are kind of large, so there are small molecules. Small molecules is just straightforward chemistry. Straightforward chemistry, organic chemistry, and biologics are normally drugs which can occur in nature, which can occur in body, which are based on amino acids, and we'll cover this later. And these are very much larger molecules, and so they are used throughout the body naturally to regulate like some body processes. Okay, so if we talk about the therapeutic areas which are the most attractive in the industry, oncology is number one always. So oncology here on top. This has amazing percentage of growth, like 14% growth. It has amazing percentage of the worldwide sales, and it is the largest, by far the largest market. It is like over 200 billion globally, and this is the largest market, and it's the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing markets, oncology. And even though, remember the survey, the scientists still believe that will not cure cancer anytime soon. And the vaccines were never so exciting until the pandemic. Now it's kind of the vaccines. There are so many trials, hundreds of trials in the world doing vaccines, and this was the least interesting segment just a few years ago. And yeah, we see like some drugs which are not growing here. Immunosuppressants are interesting anyway. And so it's kind of generally anything related to immune oncology or modulation of immune system is currently really hot. Okay. And finally, hopefully have you seen this chart? No? I'm using that. Okay. This chart is showing the changes of business models. And, I would not go through the chart in detail. We don't have time for that. But generally speaking, you would not be interested to do things in this kind of paradigm. So latest paradigms are working with the things, working with the wearable devices, and continuously monitoring things within human beings, and then automating the drug discovery and using the 3D printing and making a personalized medicine, etc. So this is all Industry 4.0 type of paradigm of business models. But the next business model would be Metaverse. Metaverse is kind of a hype word, which everybody likes, but it actually shows that there will be more and more the merging of cyberspace in our physical reality, which means that we as human beings would be fully copied into the cyberspace, fully monitored, potentially even connected with our brains, and of course with that in mind, like putting some nanorobots into ourselves, which will help find the disease as early as possible, etc. So this would be the kind of the metaverse way of delivering medicine. And we are this is kind of a vision, and we're moving into that, and gene therapies and some of the other things like the organs being printed in the space and then delivered, etc. So this is more kind of creating not pills which you have to to drink, but something like artificial organs which will act autonomously without your interference. You would not be switching on and off the organ, or you will not be switching on and off like pills. There will be living therapies, our next topic for the next lecture, living therapies which adapt to a human being and deliver as much intervention as needed. Okay, so now today's topic, the name of the lecture, Code of Life. Okay, so now hopefully you understand what is the healthcare system, what are the major trends economically, why drug pricing is the major issue, and then what is the percentage of the overall economy of this life science industry, where it's being built geographically, and what are the latest business models or approaches towards the, like in any business, but specifically in the medicine, these autonomous organs, like anything like that, or bioengineering and digital transformation is key. So this is the first part. Secondly, now we're talking about specific trend, which is gene therapies. So the interesting thing is that you remember, so we taken like holistically through the whole of the approaches towards the intervention into human health. And remember, the first part was the biological system. So if you like dive deeper into biological system, it starts with the genome. Genome is the code of life. It codes a human being, and there's not actually too many bytes. It's just like really a short story to copy a human. So genome, and genome, of course, it has genes. Genes are the parts of the genome. Genome is coded within a DNA, right? And epigenome is a way to control the expression of specific genes. Transcriptome deals with RNA, and we'll be talking about RNA today a bit. Proteome is the level of proteins, which are coded by DNA, like yes, so DNA. And microbiome, metabolome is any molecules within the body as part of the chemical reactions. Cytome is all the cells in the human body. It's called cytome. Microbiome is all the bacteria which live in the human body. It's called microbiome. And everything of that, like, so we have like genes, molecules, cells within these molecules, like work, and then the genes produce these molecules, and then cells create organs, organs create organisms, and then the population. So if you see here, the numbers are actually not that large. So they are all potentially could be computed, and you can work with this data, even with the current computers, almost. And which means that the life sciences becomes more and more computational. And with that in mind, so we'll be covering today primarily like therapies on this level, gene therapies, and a bit of RNA transcriptome therapies. Okay, so this is an overview. So gene therapies are categorized as ex vivo gene therapies and in vivo gene therapies, and then there are RNA therapies. So you know that everything within a human, within actually any living creature is coded in the DNA. And you know that the DNA, its structure is the same in banana, the same in bacteria, same in human beings. So this idea was developed like 4 billion years ago. So the DNA was available, and this is the code of life. Everything is coded in the DNA. So the idea was that in case we would be able to change the DNA, to edit this gene code, we could cure all the diseases. And this was the initial thought, but it looks like it actually didn't work. But what actually worked? We'll start today talking about ex vivo gene therapies. Ex vivo, it means that we are editing genes not within human being, but outside a human being. So what they actually do, they take the cells from the human, change that, and edit the genes of the cells outside the human being, and then put these reprogrammed cells back into the human. And then these kind of amended cells hopefully would cure the disease in the human. So So this is ex-vivo gene therapies. The first ex-vivo gene therapies were targeting cancer, and what they did, they took the T cells. T cells are cells which are part of our immune system, and these cells are killing either cancer cells, or they are killing cells which are being infected by the virus. So T cells is part of our immune system, and specifically killing the cells which are infected or cancerous. So what they did, they found out that the cancer cells have on their surface, they have a special receptor which differentiates them from the healthy cells. And if you take T cells, so T cells part of the immune system, and put the receptor, the code of the receptor into the DNA of the T cells, then they will identify all the cancerous cells in the human body and kill them. So for those who are not familiar with molecular biology, I will have to repeat that. So what they do, they take T cells, which is part of our immune system and flowing in the blood. So they take the T cells out of the human body of the cancer patient, and outside the human body, using different techniques, they put into the DNA, the genome of the T cells, a code, the gene, which codes for the receptor, which will help this T cell bind to any cancerous cell, and this T cell would not bind to any healthy cell, hopefully. And then the T cell is trained to kill the cancer cells, and then these T cells are brought back into the human being, into the bloodstream, and then identify all the cancerous cells in the human body and kill them. Which means this is potentially a curative medicine. And this was very, very successful companies like June and Kite, who pioneered this approach together with Novartis, and were some of the first ever approved gene therapies in the US. There were a few gene therapies approved outside the US before. It's a question mark whether we count them or not, including Russia, by the way, but also China. Anyway, this particular June and Kite were great success for the investors, right? So the first one was sold for $9 billion and the other for $12 billion. And what is important here is that just last week, there was an announcement that there were enough years after this procedure was applied to the cancer patients, that it's enough years of monitoring to say, at least in the view of the scientists, that these were curative medicine, that the cancer was actually cured. So this was probably one of the first time in the world that they managed to cure cancer which was thought as terminal. And these are specific specific cancers which are primarily affecting children. Okay, so this is ex-vivo gene therapy. But the idea was if we could change all the cells in the human, if there's some gene which is wrong and defective, is there a way to change all the genes in each cells which we have like 100 trillion cells in our human body? Can we use? Can you find a solution and change all the cells within the human body? And these were some techniques. The most hyped technique for that is CRISPR. Have anybody heard CRISPR at all? CRISPR? You? No? You're probably a molecular biologist by training. So the CRISPR, this is the way to change genes in the human body in vivo. So you don't take cells outside the body and change them, reprogram them outside the body, but you change cells within the body, in the living organism. So what they did with that, primarily they were focused on ocular diseases, because ocular diseases, if you change the gene and apply this to the eye, normally the drug would not go into into systemic flow. It will not go into the bloodstream. So that's why they were initially most of these gene therapies, in vivo gene therapies, were focused on ocular diseases, especially if there's a way to cure blindness or to prevent blindness, like Spark does. This is particularly exciting, and this actually is ethical to change the genes because if you compare the damage and benefits and the risks and benefits here, of course, if you can cure blindness or prevent blindness, there's a huge benefit for that, and this was ethical to do that. So these are the companies, Spark and Crispr, just an example. So there are many more actually. Who are developing in vivo gene therapies. And in my view, more exciting are RNA therapies, because we still don't have any tools to change the DNA and then undo the change. We don't have the tools for that. CRISPR is great, you know. Of course, if you are working on a wet lab, if you're working as a scientist, you know that there are a lot of limitations to CRISPR. Although it's a very popular technology in all the non-scientific literature. Anyway, it has a lot of limitations, and and you cannot undo the change. So there has to be a substantial justification for using gene therapies. And if you talk about RNA therapies, then you can actually silence specific gene, and you can switch it on and off. And this is potentially safer because yes, you can undo the change, and potentially RNA would be more interesting for the investors and for the patients. Okay, so these are like 3 topics which we'll be covering today in more detail. And now I have to do that. I will try to do this like within 3 to 5 minutes and make all of you molecular biologists, okay? 3 to 5 minutes, let's try. This is a challenge. Okay, so this is the DNA. It's in every cell, you have it in all of your cells, so this is the DNA. It's forming the chromosome, and this is really a way to make it really small. So you have 100 trillion cells in your body. In each of these cells, you have this DNA. But if you are unentangle it and make it like a line, this would be 1.5 meters. Hopefully you know this, from your school lessons. So this is really amazing how nature manages to put so much information into each of our cells. And then there's a central dogma of molecular biology, which you will learn in the molecular biology course. It says that in the nature, you have this genome code, DNA, which then is being translated, based on this DNA, there are transcripts of RNA. RNA is a short code, so DNA could be, like, if you're not molecular biologist, so DNA is like hard drive. It's like a file on a hard drive, right? And then RNA is just, RNA is just like one file. So you probably take this hard drive and you put a file into your like RAM, like RAM memory. And then based on that file, you are creating a program, something which you can, which is usable, so functional, a protein. So this is a code which is used to program building of based on 3D printing machine, which is in each of our cells, building the protein. And the protein is like a Lego block, which is kind of making some function within the organism. And it's very, very much like the IT program, because a gene, every gene has a specific code saying that from this moment you can read, and this is you can create an RNA, and then you can process it, and this is the end of the gene. So it is very much like file system with all the genes like being stored as files with the beginning, the end, and it's all kind of coded that way. But this you will learn at the molecular course, molecular biology course. And then these letters, you remember like ATGC, right? These letters, they code specific amino acids. So here you have this DNA. So DNA is stored in the nucleus, and then it is transcripted into RNA. RNA is here, messenger RNA, and RNA is coding amino acids. Amino acids, we have 20 amino acids, right? 20 amino acids. And if you would code them with just 2 letters, it would only code for 16 amino acids potentially, because there are 2, and each of those can become A, T, G, or C, and that would code only 16 letters. That is why probably the nature made triplets to code for specific amino acids. And this is a table which is being used by nature. So so 3 letters, like whatever, like AGC, whatever. So each letter would code for each 3 letters would code for specific amino acid. And then these amino acids are creating a polymer, which like this, goes like this chain here, and then it forms a protein automatically due to physics and chemistry. And this is now the functional block which can block some process within your body, or unlock it, or block it. So so this is amazing. So this is the way it works, and it means that you can intervene at many stages. You can intervene. You can change the DNA. You can actually inhibit RNA so that it doesn't translate into this protein, or you can try and mark specific proteins, and kill them once they are already produced. So there are many ways you can intervene in this process. And the companies are going, currently, they're creating modality, a therapeutic modality for each of these stages. So, and today we're discussing primarily gene editing. So gene editing is the kind of the way that you amend the actual chromosome, or amend the genome code. So gene therapy research is a very long story, and of course there was some idea of that there's some hereditary information in the DNA back in the 19th century. But this is just historical. But what dates I want you to remember is 1953, when the DNA double helix structure was discovered by Jim Watson and Francis Crick, and then the central dogma of DNA going into RNA, and then RNA translating into protein. This was discovered in 1958. So this is kind of relatively not that long ago. In 1987, there were a discovery of the CRISPR palindromes. A CRISPR is a technology within bacteria for them to fight off the viruses initially. So the changing of their genome, so they had the mechanism to actually to keep their genome intact. And then there were ways to create the gene-engineered mammal, so Dolly, you remember 1996. And then the major milestone was the Human Genome Project. Human Genome Project is lasted for almost 10 years. And the idea was to, like, really, over 10 years, the idea was to decipher the DNA, the full human DNA, because, the hope was that with that we could cure all the diseases. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But it costed millions, or even hundreds of millions, to decipher the human genome first time. And then these NGS methods appeared in 2005, and we will talk about NGS later. NGS is new genomic sequencing methods. This NGS makes it cheaper and cheaper to make genetic tests and to basically to sequence the DNA of human being. In 2017, there were first CAR-T therapies approved, which is the first gene therapy in the US. And finally, in 2018, the one Chinese rogue scientist created like genetically modified babies. And of course, he got the sentence, was jailed because this was unethical and it didn't make any sense from the medical standpoint. Anyway, so this is the timeline. So I want you to remember 1953, the discovery of DNA double helix structure, 2003, finalization of the Human Genome Project, and then 2017, first FDA-approved CAR-T. The speed of the innovation in the gene therapy space is increasing. You need to understand that the Crispr, which is kind of, in my view, a very hyped technology, and just last week, we had a major research coming from ARK Invest. I know ARK Invest, anybody heard of that? This is a major fund having over 50 billion under management, managed by Katie Wood, and she's very famous. Said that you don't know, most of you don't know her. Anyway, she's very famous because she puts all the research publicly, as compared to other managers. So she put like a 200-page report last week, and I can send it to you as well, giving showing the major breakthroughs and the most attractive and the hottest areas for investment. The hottest area for her, one of the hottest areas, was gene editing. And what she claims in the research is that that the speed with which the gene editing is being developed really grows, is getting faster and faster. So you need to remember that CRISPR is just one out of a few tools to edit genes. And there were previous tools like ZFN, which is zinc finger nucleases. And it took like 20 years actually for it to be actually active, and this was the first tool to edit genes within a human being, and generally within living organism. And then there was TALEN, which also took a few years to get into human trials. And CRISPR was much faster than that. So you see that what she claims with that, and I would just, this is just a quote, the citation. So that CRISPR showed that gene editing is getting much faster in terms of development, and would become one of the major technologies in the next 5 to 10 years, and it would be dominated by CRISPR. So these three tools, three technologies, which we've seen, and if you look at these two charts, it shows that in the academic space and in terms of the clinical trials, CRISPR is now dominating. So in terms of gene editing, looks like CRISPR will be dominating, but CRISPR is changing all the time, so it gets better and better. So in gene editing space, the technology which probably would dominate is CRISPR. Okay. Here you see the number of therapies which are being developed using gene editing. And it now goes into hundreds. And you see there was a change back in 2017, and generally around this space, around 2014, 2017, the year where the first gene therapy was approved. And later they were growing faster and faster. So it feels like gene editing and gene therapy space will be booming at least for many years ahead. And there are generally, if you categorize this, the technologies which are used for gene editing, there are ways how you can add a gene, and there are ways how you can actually edit a gene or replace a gene. And currently, we can read the genome. We can actually disrupt some specific gene, and at some point, hopefully we can actually read and write and then edit. So we can undo the change or do specific change, etc. So this will hopefully happen. Also, we see that there are more and more companies, more and more drugs being approved in the space. So let's go for. So this is gene therapy overview. Overall, you see that this is really growing. And if we talk about today, today there are really a lot of trials being run with gene therapy, and we need to understand that specifically with gene therapies, most of those therapies are specifically targeting cancer. So they are primarily anti-cancer products. So you see here this really dominates the space, and then you have some rare diseases where the disease is driven by specific gene, which is logical. So this is the second. So probably it feels like potentially this would be primary application of the gene therapies, because cancer is a gene disease, is a gene-driven, is a mutation-driven disease, and that's why the gene therapy's first application would be oncology, and second application would be rare diseases which are driven by specific gene. And it sounds like potentially a narrow application. We see, of course, that there are a lot of a long tail of many other potential applications of gene therapies, but it doesn't feel like we'll be targeting infection diseases using gene therapies. It would not make, at least from on the face of it, it would not make much sense. So anyway, gene therapies are expected to double within the next 5 years, and there's a list of all the gene therapies approved so far. And again, you can see here, back in 2011, there was first gene therapy approved in Russia. It is a bit different gene therapy. It's but anyway, this is real. We could be we could claim that we are pioneers in the space, and Russia was one of those countries which approved one of the first gene therapies in the world. And of course, China did this even before ourselves, in early 2000. But you see also that, of course, the most of the trials are being performed in the U.S. with gene therapies, and then on the second space is again China. It's all kind of similar everywhere. So, but you have to understand how this works. So this is about overall gene therapies, but then if we talk about this ex-vivo gene therapies, if we talk about taking the T cells, so the cells of the immune system, reprogramming these T cells outside the human being and then putting it back. So this is called CAR T. CAR T is one of the most hottest trends in the space. CAR T is abbreviation for chimeric antigen receptor T cell. Chimeric antigen receptor T cell. Chimeric means that this is an antigen receptor which was added to the T cell, and this chimeric antigen receptor actually helps the T cell find all the cancerous cells within the human being and kill them. So this is CAR T, the hottest area, and I mentioned to you that the first three approvals of CAR T were back in 2017, 2018. These were Juna, Kite, and Novartis, three companies which managed to put and approve first gene therapies in the US based on CAR T technology. But the CAR T, unfortunately, has its limitations. So CAR T, firstly, like the first CAR T, they targeted specific blood cancers, which are like really small in number. So like acute lymphoblastic leukemia and a few other diseases, which are really rare diseases. And the blood cancers overall is just 20% of the market. 80% of the cancers are solid cancers or solid tumors. Solid tumors like lung cancer or breast cancer and others, these are called solid tumors. And this is 80% of the market. And then this 20% is these blood cancers. So whoever can actually create a cell therapy, a CAR T therapy, which would help cure solid tumors, this would be a major advancement. So this is the first thing. So like all of the current developers are trying to target not like blood cancers, but solid cancers, which are a larger market. First thing. And secondly, the first generation of CAR T was autologous. Autologous means that they took the T cells from the patient and reprogrammed them, the T cells outside the body, and put them back. And this is from the scalability perspective. This is really tough. In terms of production, scalability, logistics, everything. It is really very expensive to reprogram cells, and you know, if somebody would be able to create a database of cells or a data bank of, or actually cells which would be fit for any patient with the same disease, and this would of course would be the kind of the next major milestone for CAR T. So two major limitations in CAR T. Firstly, that it only can now attack blood cancers, and secondly, so far it only is autologous. Autologous means that you have to take the blood T cells from the patient, and you cannot just have like a peel, like whatever, like some liquid with the like cells which would fit to any patients. You don't have that. Which means that the CAR T, the first generation CAR T therapies are difficult to scale and not a really broad spectrum in their applications. Next generation CAR T therapies are trying to resolve these issues, and if you want to deal with curative medicine in the cancer space, you have to look at CAR T. But then you have to make it not autologous, but allogenic. Allogenic means that you create cells, a bank of cells, which can be used with any patient with the same disease. So allogenic, and you would target normally solid tumors. So So CAR T are using like originally T cells, but then in the molecular biology course, you will learn how many other cells are available in the immune system. So T cells are just one type of cells which are specifically used in the immune system to kill infected cells or cancerous cells. And here, within this T cells, they were just using this particular type of cells and created this CAR T cells. So there are like other ways you can use the use the T cells and try to use them for solid tumors. There are also natural killer cells, which are also kind of similar to T cells, but they are very different. They are short-lived, and they may have less side effects. And then there are myeloid cells, which is macrophages, and hopefully macrophages you heard from from your biology classes in the school. So anyway, the industry is trying to find another cell which could be used to fight off the solid tumors, or to become allergenic. And why from the very beginning, why you cannot actually take T cells from one patient and put them into another patient? Do you know? Why you have to take the T cells from only this patient and then put it back to the same patient? Why is that? Sorry? Immunity, right. So it's called graft versus host disease, right. So they'll normally the kind of the T cells from the other person would not be accepted by your immune system, and all of these T cells will be fight off, and you would not be cured. So but people are trying to find T cells which would be universal. So like any cells in the human being which could be universal and will not drive the immune reaction and will not be killed by the immune system. Yeah, so these are like a lot of ways you can use like different cells as a basis for CAR T therapy, and we will see a lot of innovation in the space. There are like over 200 companies doing CAR T cells, doing trials and trying to find the next generation CAR T system. Okay, and this is the overall overview of all these trials. So what you see here, most of those trials, they are already using the CAR T technology because the CAR T proved to be efficient and workable, and the companies which are more conservative, they try to reuse the biological weapons and tools which prove to be successful and prove to be actually workable. And then, of course, there are some more innovative things in some ways, but of course there are many less trials doing the other approaches to CAR T. The other thing is that the targets. So I mentioned to you that there are specific receptors which are which are only on cancerous cells and not on the healthy cells. And the first target for the CAR T therapy was CD19. This was the receptor which was available on some of these blood cancer cells and was not available on healthy cells. And all the CAR T therapies were targeting the CD19. And if you see, even now, there are many, many more trials targeting the same receptor because it actually works. So these would be already Me Too drugs. And I would say that the Me Too drugs would potentially be less attractive for big pharma players, and they would not raise as much money, and they will potentially be acquired later on, unless unless they have disruptive innovation in the space, like, for example, if they would be allergenic instead of autologous. If they manage to make the bank of cells that you don't have to take the cells from the patient. So in case this happens, and most of these clinical trials, they're trying to make allergenic CAR T therapies, which would target the very well-known target. So CAR T, generally CAR T trials, most of them are positive. It goes well. You see here that these are all blood cancers or hematological, so blood cancers, and these are solid tumors. In solid tumors, there are also just few targets which are currently being used in where you have clinical trials. So HER2, a specific receptor primarily in breast cancer, available in breast cancer. So most of those clinical trials are against breast cancer, and hopefully we will see advancements in that, and potentially like a curative therapy for breast cancer. Okay, so this is it for CAR T in oncology trials. And then, as I told you, gene therapies are used primarily in oncology space, and then the second application is in the therapies for rare diseases, where the disease is potentially driven by a specific gene, which you can disrupt or which you can edit, and this would cure the disease. And you see here that there are a few specific diseases which are currently being worked on. So ALS, anybody heard of ALS? Anybody heard of Ice Bucket Challenge? Ice Bucket Challenge, Ice Bucket Challenge. Probably too young. Ice Bucket Challenge, yes. Even Mark Zuckerberg made this Ice Bucket Challenge, and Bill Gates and everybody. Ice Bucket Challenge, where they had this this pile of ice and put on themselves, right? And then you have to show that you can survive under this ice flow. So yeah, Ice Bucket Challenge, like at least somebody heard of that. This was a great way to attract funding and attract attention to the rare disease called ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which is a disease which lasts for some long time, and finally people unfortunately cannot move, and they have a lot of pain in. And this is the disease which currently doesn't have cure. Hopefully, we'll see a cure based on gene therapies. And another is hemophilia A. Hemophilia A, which is hemophilia A. Do you know this disease? No. This is the disease where you have issues with the bloodstream, and it is the current. The current trial results show that this could be potentially cured within the next years. Well, and finally, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, DMD. You saw these people who have very undeveloped muscles, right? Have you seen these people? So this is normally a DMD disease. Duchenne muscular dystrophy disease, DMD, and this is a specific gene which we'll cover at our lessons, at our practical lessons, which drives this disease. And if you can actually disrupt it or change it or change the way it is transcribed, you can actually cure the disease. And we hope that we will see the cure for this disease very soon. And there are companies like Sarepta, for example, which is in late-stage trials. Pfizer is also in the late-stage trials to cure this disease. So gene therapies are potentially a cure for rare diseases which are driven by specific genes. Yeah, and finally, to wrap up, our today's lecture. Big pharma companies are really trying to build gene therapy platforms within themselves. They do believe that this is the future of the medicine, the future of the healthcare industry, and the future of life sciences. And they're putting a lot of R&D effort into that. They are acquiring companies, sometimes at early stages, because the approval process potentially could be short for gene therapies, because it's rare disease, and you really, if you manage to cure like a few patients for the disease which doesn't have any therapy, it could be approved very, very quickly. FDA is expecting to approve 200 gene therapies by 2025. You saw the numbers like 16, 10, nothing like that. But in the works, there are so many trials at late stage for gene therapies that it is expected that there will be 200 drugs approved by 2025. CRISPR is currently dominating as a technology this market. There's also a very well-known approach of adeno-associated virus vectors, which is used in Sputnik V as well, in many gene therapies. This is a well-known approach. The problem with that is that it creates immunity against the vector, so you can use it normally just once, but we're seeing that with Sputnik V that somehow it doesn't. It can be reused as booster many times. We shall see if the immunity actually works against the vector or not very soon. And there are currently 90 companies working on that. There are like almost 300 investors investing into that. There are a lot of scientific papers. There are many ways how you can approach that. And there are like companies here which are listed, which went public, raised a lot of funding, and working in the space. So gene therapy is really very, very attractive. And then the cell therapy. Cell therapy is very much connected to gene therapies because currently cell therapy means it's not stem cell therapy, it's cell therapy, which means that you take cells from the human, from the patient, reprogram them outside the patient and put it back. And this is called Ex-Vivo gene therapy. So that's why cell therapy currently is very, very close to gene therapy, and they are very much entangled. And with the cell therapies, yes, so cell therapies normally you would be once you would be able to make allogenic cell therapies, where you don't have to take the cells from this particular patient, but you can create a bank of cells. This will grow like many times, manifold. And this is currently the major limit for that. Of course, there are other factors like pricing, etc., but still, this market would grow substantially and is expected to grow to like from current 4 billion last year to potentially 60 billion in 2026, with 70% growth per year. And this means that the current base is very low because previously the cell therapies were deprioritized and nobody believed that it may work, and there were a lot of regulatory hurdles for that. But currently, like regulatory hurdles are lowered, and we have many more approvals. Yeah, so around over 100 companies are working on that. There are like 200 indications, so many indications where cell therapy could be applied, and specifically the CAR T type of therapy dominates the space. And now, if you start reading some industrial overviews, you would see CAR T everywhere. So hopefully you remember that. You will hear the gene therapy space, the CRISPR, and all of that. So, okay, so this is to wrap up this technology. Hopefully, I know it may be tough for those of you who are not molecular biologists, but you would get accustomed to it and get used to that. So, so next time we'll be discussing living therapies, and by that I mean we'll be discussing more about cell therapies. We'll be discussing more about stem cell therapies, microbiome. Microbiome, again, you remember that all the bacteria that live in us, and how we can use these bacteria to cure the disease, and synthetic biology. Synthetic biology, where you can create life from scratch. So you can create a bacteria which will work as a nanorobot within you, and this will be discussing in our next lecture. Thank you so much. Now I'm open to questions. Thank you. Oh,
Раз.
So, do we have microphone?
Раз.
One.
Thank
Okay.
you. I have a question about microbiome. Like basically, I'm thinking like it's about more people will like. I'm not sure they will buy something like that will like buy. If you are not like a rich person, I don't think you will buy something that will analyze your microbiome just to feel like a bit better. Like, isn't it like I don't know how to explain like.
Is there a
that's
market? You
important.
mean, is there a
Yeah,
market for this? Well, microbiome tests are actually, well, if they would help to prevent disease, and if they would be covered by the state, then of course that would be really, or covered by insurance, that would be very exciting. Actually, even now, without coverage, people are buying that. I mean, like, not rich people, like normal people are buying that. Because and we'll be covering that later. Microbiome is our next lecture. and even the lecture will have omics and the diagnostics and medtech. And in omics space, we'll be discussing metatranscriptomics. Metatranscriptomics, which means that the transcriptome of the human being and the transcriptome of the microbiome, so of all the bacteria, like what RNA they are producing. And with this data in hand, and with the correlations between your DNA, which is kind of what nature gave to you, and then the microbiome, which shows potentially your current status, what is happening to your body right now, you can create some real, like, substantial value, and make some helpful diagnostics, which then could be covered by the insurance or by the state. If it's just for fun, just looking what bacteria you have in your gut, it would not be covered by anybody, and I don't think there's a market for that. And this is, by the way, a problem of genetic tests, because genetic tests, they just show what is kind of the potential issues, potential risks, but it doesn't show what is your current status, what is your current state, right? So, and you can do this genetic test just once. A microbiome test you would normally do all the time to make sure you see any developments, any strange developments, and potentially identify that there's some disease state in your body.
Okay, and one more question about, for example, 3D printing of like tissue engineering and so on. It's also like kind of interesting startup, for example. And I do have a question because there are some companies, for example, like a Cellink, that like produce the 3D bioprinters, which allows to print some type of organs, as you said, or
Right.
like tissue. So if you are the scientist who have an idea to build this type of the startup in Russia, as we discussed earlier, you should wait for 10 years before your like final, I don't know, tissue or sort of material will appear on the market. That's why is the question, how do you think, is there any like, I don't know, market in Russia that you can build by yourself by print of this type of the materials? Is there any sense to grow such sort of company?
Yeah, firstly, yeah, this is definitely a global trend, and we'll be covering that. So we'll be like in 3D bioprinting. We'll be covering, I think, in MedTech, he will be covering the cyborgs and everything. So, so the actually, there's a company in Russia which is doing that. You know, the 3D bio. And I will try to invite the founder of the company to this lecture, not to the lecture, but to the practical lessons, and tell us a bit how they cope with the kind of a small market in Russia, and they are doing bioprinting of organs in the space. So, and you know, so this is a famous company actually. 3D Bio. So, so they are this 3D bioprinting solutions. So they are doing this in Russia. So, so this is feasible at least, and hopefully we'll have a chance to ask the founder how they managed to do that in the country with actually a smaller market potential than like compared to some other countries. So try and do that.
So I have a question regarding the pharmaceutical industry. What will happen with this industry if we are able to cure some diseases?
Yeah, that's a good question. So sometimes there's a myth again, so that every disease is already cured. Just big pharma guys who are killing the scientists, who are just discovered something, a cure for cancer, a cure for HIV or anything like that. Because the big pharma are not interested in a cure. They're interested in like chronic diseases to make a lot of money. Well, at least if we look in the history, we would see that, for example, Hep C drug was approved in 2013, which cured hepatitis C. This is a cure of hepatitis C in the 99%. So it's essentially the disease, like it's a large disease. There are over 100 million people which are infected by Hep C, and the drug is actually quite expensive, but the production costs are very low. So production cost is like less than $100, and the price is over $80,000. Of course, Big Pharma made a lot of money on that, and this was the most successful drug in terms of its launch. It managed to make sales of 42 billion within the first 3 years of sales, which is really impressive. And without any marketing, anything. You don't need a marketing for Hep C drug. Everybody who is infected, they know that they're infected, and they need this drug badly. And if it's a cure, then of course they will use it. So the history shows that nobody killed the scientists who discovered this Hep C drug, and I strongly believe that nobody actually killed these guys who make this CAR T, which is also a cure for one of those cancers, and it's great. And there were a lot of money being made by the investors, by the founders, and by the big pharma players in the market. So there are so many unmet needs and so many unsolved issues, and so many diseases, like rare diseases. There are 7,000 rare diseases. There are like, you name it. So I think that the life sciences sector would be booming because of all of these new technologies coming to the market, and we'll see a lot of curative solutions. And this is there's more than enough for another like 50 years to work in this industry and to deliver more and more medicine. Of course, there's an issue of moving to the preventative medicine, to the kind of other ways not to cure the disease, but then to avoid the disease. And this is a question mark. How do you stimulate big pharma players to work in that space in the preventative medicine? And this will be discussed in our last lecture. But generally, I don't believe in this myth. I believe that if there's a cure, if somebody finds a cure for HIV or for cancer, this company would get acquired at a very high valuation, and people, everybody would be able to profit on that and to invest the money which comes from these profits into new curative therapies, and this would be like this kind of a cycle. So this industry is definitely where people will still have diseases for many, like tens of years ahead, and we will not see cures for everything. Although you know that Mark Zuckerberg, he created a kind of foundation to cure all the diseases by 2100th year. So we shall see if it works. And many other billionaires are trying to cure or to fund efforts for like finding a cure for aging or anything like that. So we shall see that. But it's all a matter of changing the regulatory aspects and stimulating big pharma to invest into like preventative medicine, etc. So yeah, so there are a lot of efforts to do that. So hopefully at some point we shall see more of a healthcare, not sick care, what we have today. Okay. Okay.
Okay. I've read an article some time ago about bacteriophage. It's a virus which consumes bacteria, and so I've been thinking about it. Is there a way for people, for scientists, to maybe construct specific bacteriophage viruses so that they could consume and thus heal people? For example, you've mentioned about superbacteria which are resistant to, for example, antibiotics. So do you think this could be a solution for such a problem? Thanks.
Well, this idea, I think that this is like many, like tens of years ago. It happened that people discovered bacteriophages. Bacteriophages. I don't have the picture now. Bacteriophages are very nice. If you can find the bacteriophage and show it to the audience, would be great. Bacteriophage is very unusual virus which attacks bacteria, and it is very specific to specific bacteria, and ideally it could be a weapon to like kill specific bacteria in the organism and not affect anything in the human being, because bacteriophages normally are safe for humans. Nevertheless, the problem with bacteriophages is that our immune system, even these bacteriophages are safe, our immune system still kills all of them, and they cannot actually get to the bacteria, to the kind of wrong bacteria in our body. Also, there's a kind of a change in approach to bacteria in our organism. Potentially, it's not a matter of bad behavior of specific bacteria, or like it's not about taxonomy. It's not about specific line of bacteria which are bad for health. It could be that you don't kill the bacteria, but you're trying to engineer the microbiome of a healthy person, which means, for example, you kind of, in a simplest fashion, you can eat or drink some probiotics, which would help a specific colony of bacteria thrive and grow, and rebalance the types of bacteria you have in your gut. And you don't have to kill specific bacteria, because if you kill, potentially you kill, for example, all of the colony, and you're killing also some other bacteria around that, and you actually destroy the balance within your gut. And this will be discussed in our next lecture next time. So, but the answer is yes. The answer is this idea is, I think, 40 years. So it's 40 years old. It's very old. Nobody managed to do that. There's a company which we thought we were thinking of investing into, which is called Contrafact. It's a public company which are trying to like really attack specific bacteria using bacteriophages. And have you found the picture? No. Okay.
I couldn't. Unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So just immune system kills them off. Just before they are active in the human body. That's too sad. Okay. Thank you so much. So we'll be like discussing this. This is our plan, and these are tough lectures. I understand that some of you are not really familiar with molecular biology, which is fine. And I'm trying to explain to you in the simplest fashion how it works. You should read more and more industrial papers, industrial news. So you will definitely find in any kind of news, like newsletter coming from endpoints.com, firstbiotech.com. So these are kind of the major newsletters. In each of those you will have CAR-T, you will have gene therapies, you will have all the things which we are discussing here, because these are global technology trends in the life sciences. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you.